Welcome to the Success in Medicine podcast. I'm Dr. Samir Desai, and I'm here today with my partner and co-author, Dr. Rajani Katta. Dr. Katta and I are the authors of the books Medical School Interview and Multiple Mini Interview. And today, Rajani, I'm really looking forward to starting this multi-part session on the medical school interview. And for our first episode, I wanted to jump right in and start with one of the most common questions that applicants are going to be asked. And that is the question, why did you apply to our school? So Rajani, can you give us your take on this question?
Absolutely. That is such a common question. I'd have to say that some variation of this question is asked in almost every medical school interview.
That's right. And Rajani, you and I have talked a lot about this question and how important it is, and how schools have different ways of phrasing this question. So what are some other ways that schools might ask it?
Well, there's kind of the standard ones that I think students would recognize. For example, why do you want to be a student here? But there are also other ways of asking this question. So for example, medical schools might ask, describe your ideal medical school. What qualities are you looking for in a school? What 2 or 3 things are important to you in a medical school? Or even questions such as, what interests you most about our school? Or tell me what you know about our school. So a lot of different ways of asking sort of the same question.
Absolutely. And Rajani, I also want to talk about how students should best answer this very important question. And you know that I do a lot of mock interviews. And when I work with my mentees, I always ask this question. And one of the things that I'm surprised by is how often the answer sounds the same. And so I want to give you an example, Rajani, of a common answer that I receive. So here's that example. I'll get a great education here. There are so many research opportunities, and students really seem to love the school. Also, the faculty is very involved with the students, and having all the affiliated hospitals that you have is really great.
That is a good, solid answer. I'm going to give you a few more answers that I've heard from students that I've worked with. So, for example, this is one. I'm really looking for 2 things. First, a program that really integrates the clinical with the basic sciences. And my impression is that your school does a good job with that. The second thing is the breadth of opportunities here, all of the research that's going on. I can't imagine that it would be difficult to find many people that I would be interested and just love to be able to work with.
And so, Rajani, as our listeners are hearing these common answers, what is it that you want them to take away from the content of these answers? In other words, what really strikes you about these answers?
Well, I think if you're an applicant listening to this, these do sound like solid, good, strong answers, and they are, but there's really nothing that stands out about them. So if you imagine yourself on the other side of the interviewer desk, if you're doing interviews and speaking to, let's say, 10 applicants in one day, it would be hard for me to pick out one applicant from this response that really made an impact that would really help me remember them. And that, to me, really represents a wasted opportunity.
I agree with you 100%, Rajani. And I would say that this question really is an opportunity for medical school applicants to shine. So can you give us an example from one of the students that you've worked with and tell us how that student was able to improve their answer?
Absolutely. And between you and I, we've worked with hundreds of applicants. I mean, some really strong, amazing applicants. And I want to present one of those applicants, but I do want to make a point that I've changed all identifying details. But the underlying story here is a great example. And so this was a medical school applicant named Elena. And when I met with her in an unofficial capacity, I was just really blown away by her motivation and her drive and all of the activities that she had already been able to work on and been able to complete. This was a young woman who was really on a mission, and she had been working for years to accomplish her goals. I was just really impressed with her.
So it really sounds like she had done some wonderful things and had a lot to offer. So can you tell us a bit more about her?
Yes. Elena had grown up in a medically underserved area with a significant Latino population. And in her community, there were relatively few primary care physicians and even fewer specialists. Unfortunately, several of her relatives had passed away from cancer. And so Elena developed an early interest in oncology. And so her goal was to complete medical school and then pursue residency training in internal medicine, followed by fellowship training in oncology. And her plan was to go back to her home community and practice oncology. And I thought this was really interesting and really, amazing that she would be one of only 2 oncologists serving a 4-county area. So in order to be prepared in college, Elena had worked with Dr. Garcia, who was a dermatology faculty member at a local medical school. And they had developed an instructional module to help primary care physicians distinguish benign skin lesions from cancerous skin lesions. So their goal with this project was to provide a resource for primary care physicians that were practicing in parts of the state because these parts of the state lacked access to dermatologists. Elena was also involved in organizing and implementing skin cancer screenings in these underserved areas. So really, just an amazing applicant who had already done so much.
Absolutely. So what I'm wondering is, what question did you ask her and how did she respond?
Well, in our practice interview, I asked, why are you interested in our medical school? And I'm going to go ahead and give you a reenactment of what she said.
I first heard about your school from my faculty mentor, Dr. Garcia. Your school has an excellent reputation, and she spoke very highly of the education you offer. You're also well known for quality of teaching and diversity of patients, which I value. I also would love to live in Dallas and have family in the Fort Worth area.
I have to say that this is a solid answer, but it did seem a bit generic.
That's exactly what I discussed with Elena. In analyzing her answer, what I noticed was that there was nothing that really stood out about her answer that helped distinguish her from other applicants. And she really did not highlight her own strengths in any way. So I really did feel like it was a missed opportunity.
And so, Rajani, you and I have talked a lot about how we can help students really create a compelling answer, one that does justice to all the wonderful things that they've been a part of. And you've developed a framework, a process, so to speak, to guide students in creating that type of answer. What's the process that you teach to your mentees?
Well, I have to say, for every one of the common medical school interview questions, you and I have worked really hard to develop a step-by-step approach for every one of these questions. And for Elena, the process that we went through, I really wanted to help not only improve her response, but also give the medical school application committee a much better sense of her mission, her drive, and her hard work, so that the answer wasn't just focused on the medical school itself. So for this particular question, I like a 4-part approach. So step 1 is reflection. And I really wanted Elena to sit down and write out what she had already accomplished in her career to date. And not just her accomplishments, but also her mission, her drive, her values. What had led her towards certain organizations or towards certain projects? So really, it was this whole process of reflecting back on what she had already done. And then step 2 is research. And by research, I mean really go in depth and research this particular medical school. And in a future episode, you and I are planning to discuss this more in depth about how you can research a school. And certainly it starts with going over the website of the school. And it also then goes on from there, talking to current medical students, talking to alumni, talking to physicians in the community and finding out what the school is known for. And essentially what you're researching is, what is the school's mission? What is the school's focus, values? What are some of the initiatives that the school is working on? What are some of the projects that are going on there? What are some of the things that they are known for? What is in the news about the school? What can you find out about the curriculum? So there's really a lot that you can research about the school to find out what makes it unique, what makes it valuable, and really, overall, why would you want to attend a school? You want to find out what makes this school such a great place to train. And then step 3 is tying it together. You're really looking for areas of commonality. What do you have in your background that ties in with what the school is known for or what the school is aiming for? As a simple example, what do you value and what does the school value? Or what have you worked on that ties into what the school is working on? And then the last step, if you feel comfortable with one other step, is to really bring it back to your future goals. So these qualities and these strengths of the medical school, how can those help you in your own future career? So I think it's really important that a student steps back and really thinks about these 4 steps in the process.
So that's a great framework, a great process. And I'm very curious, when you introduced that to Elena, how was she able to use that to transform her answer?
Oh, I have to say, she did fantastic. So let's just go ahead and hear a reenactment right now of her after answer.
I first learned about your school through my faculty mentor. Dr. Garcia is a graduate of your school, and she's always spoken highly of the training she received. I would love to be a medical student at your school for a number of reasons. In shadowing physicians, I've learned that it's important to go to a school that places an emphasis on clinical skills. Your school has a reputation for being a leader in clinical skills development. The early patient contact, frequent observation of skills followed by regular feedback, and simulation lab are particularly appealing to me. It's also important to me that I develop a strong foundation for the practice of high-quality care with patient safety in mind. That's why I'm really excited about your unique patient safety curriculum. And finally, I know that your school has a track for the underserved, and I could really see myself thriving in this track. In college, some of my most rewarding experiences occurred when I was involved in organizing and implementing health fairs for rural communities. Receiving education and caring for an underserved population would be fantastic because I would like to make this an important part of my future career in medicine. I grew up in a medically underserved area and would like to return to my hometown as an internist and oncologist. On a personal note, I do have family in the Fort Worth area, and training in Dallas would allow me to spend time with family.
Wow, I have to say that is a very powerful answer. And I'm somebody who has interviewed hundreds of applicants for medical school. And I can tell you that type of answer would not just resonate with me, but having sat in on so many medical school admissions committee meetings, it's an answer that would resonate with my colleagues as well. And for our listeners out there, we have additional information on our website, thesuccessfulmatch.com. If you click on our podcast page, you'll be able to access the show notes for this episode where we have linked to other helpful resources. And in our next episode, I want to delve deeper into the medical school interview and its importance and role in the entire medical school admissions process. So until next time, I'm Dr. Samir Desai, and this is the Success in Medicine podcast.